I think I was like 13 or 14. I had already read a handful of Stephen King's books, and I think I was scared to read this one because on the back of the paperback it said the most frightening book Stephen King has ever written. And I was already, a very frightened kid, like I was scared very easily, so I was already very affected by Stephen King's work. So this specific book felt very taboo, but it definitely stayed with me for a long time.
I read Pet Sematary when I was way too young. When I was 8 years old, I went through a phase where I read a bunch of Stephen King, and my parents were just happy I was reading. So I read Cujo, Christine, It, and Pet Sematary. And Pet Sematary was the most disturbing to me.
The first time I read Salem's Lot, that changed me. At that point, I was hooked and read everything as they were coming out. And Pet Sematary is one that every time I read it, it seems scarier. It actually, as I became an adult and had children and started having an understanding of what it would feel like to be in that situation, it just resonated more.
Ultimately, that's why the book was very deeply disturbing. It's believable, even though it makes this massive jump. It's still very believable. And if you can get that, if you can get the believability, then I think you'll get it right. Or you'll have something that very definitely scares, horrifies, but really deeply affects and disturbs somebody.
(113) Hotel, take one.
You're afraid of me.
My pitch originally was, this isn't about the cat. This isn't about the woods. This isn't about a magical burying grounds. This is about grief. And the monster in this film is loss.
Paramount always owned this project. I approached Paramount about redoing it, going back to the book. So we worked on it for a lot of years. It had stops and starts, but we really only worked with 2 writers over that time period. Matt Greenberg and then Jeff Bueller. Those were the 2 that really are the foundation of the movie.
King, at his best, doesn't just write horror. He's a real creator of myths, and this is one of his greatest books. So we can reinvent certain things about it. I mean, I compared it to Frankenstein and Dracula and everything like that. You can make emendations to it. You can tweak some things, and you should, because you don't want to just do a frame-for-frame remake of what's been done before. But you have to stay within the spirit of it.
This has been a project I've been involved with for a few years and has gone through various stages of development. It's one of those projects that once it came across my desk, I never wanted to let go of because I love it so much.
Maybe not the longest development I've ever been through, but pretty close. I mean, almost a decade of development. This book was hard to adapt in a lot of ways because so much of the book is family drama. And there's a big span of it that precedes the death of the cat and certainly the death of the child. So the trick was, as you're making a movie, how do you move up some of the scary stuff, the big horror stuff, into the early part of the movie? Because in the book, it comes much later. I mean, the last third of that book is horror, but the front part of it is not, It also took the studio a long time to find the courage to make a movie about a dead child.
May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and comfort you and lift you up.
Sometimes there's the shadow of the previous work, whether it was the book itself or whether it was an adaptation. Obviously, Pet Sematary was a film that was very popular. It is such a great example of what horror movies were doing in the 80s. The music, the Ramones, the tone, there's an element of campiness to it, but it still manages to scare the living crap out of you.
That film terrified everybody who saw it. Almost everybody you talk to knows that movie. They're like, oh, the first thing they say is that movie scared the shit out of me. I remember, Stephen King wrote that script, and there's a strange combination of stuff that they were able to put into that movie from the book, because there's so much stuff in the book. And I think that was the triumph of that first movie. And it's probably the reason why we're trying to put all of these elements, Zelda and Pascal and all of these things, into our movie. I don't know that we would have had the confidence to do that if the first movie hadn't been done.
Since that time, horror movie audiences have grown to be a much more sophisticated audience. So the challenge was to find the version of Pet Sematary that would fit into our contemporary life and resonate with a contemporary audience.
But that's how we see it really, as like a readaptation, you know, like not necessarily a remake of the other movie. That movie, I was a big fan of it when I was growing up. It had an effect on me. We're not trying to just kind of like retell the same movie. That movie's great and it exists. It's still there. We want to tell our version of it.
There were many starts and stops in the long development process where we really met with a lot of directors.
We're big Stephen King fans, so when we heard that they were remaking it, we definitely wanted in on it. But it took a while. We had to pitch it quite a lot, but they liked our vision for it, and they liked what we were trying to do with it. They liked that we wanted to go back to the book more.
With Dennis and Kevin, they had such clarity about what was significant about the book. They had such clarity about Stephen King and why people loved his stuff. And they knew what was missing from our script that was critical for the fans, and just what was great in the book that we'd have to find a way to put into it. And ultimately, we chose them for that reason, because they had a great sense of storytelling as writers.
They had this project for so long, and it had been developed like 10 years, I think, that I think they had sort of gotten away from the core source material. And so we made a big push to trust the book. And so a lot of our notes really were about getting things back to the original novel and being respectful to that. A, because we're huge Stephen King fans, but B, because that just seems to work. Fans and audience members really respect that.
Kevin and Dennis are both huge horror fans. I mean, just, you know, over-the-top horror fans. They know they kept talking about movies I've never even heard of, forget about not seen. And so their passion for Stephen King and the genre and the uniqueness of their movies is the reason that we picked them.
I just love working with directors who are obsessed with the work, obsessed with getting it right. They don't have time to be prima donnas or preoccupy themselves with anything but what they're going to get, you know, and they see it and they know it and they know what they want, but they're eager to hear what you think.
Even though they're two directors, it's almost like they usually have like the same thoughts, and I guess it's really because they've worked with each other for so long and like complement each other so well.
What the producers have really done has taken a lot of courage to kind of invest in lots of people from from an indie background really, and given them the chance with this, with, you know, it's quite a hot property in terms of this this script and this story.
Action.
What is this place?
Pet Sematary.
This story, you know, is more than just a horror tale. It's got real human drama. It's about grief and tragedy, family tragedy, and that, I think, gave it another layer. That made me know that we could get good actors for this, because a lot of the horror movies that are made now or then are really about the scares only and not a great challenge for the actors. But I knew this would get us a great team of actors.
We were fortunate in this case of getting 4 extraordinary actors, and I think that allowed us to get deeper into some of the psychological and emotional elements of the story.
I should never have shown you that place. But you did.
It was very important for us to cast Lewis first.
Yeah.
We have been big fans of Jason Clarke his entire career. He was such a fan of the book and of Stephen King that he was the guy that every weekend was calling us up on the phone saying, "Hey guys, I just read this chapter a 10th time, and there's an amazing line that Lewis says that we have to get in on Monday when we shoot. We have to get this line in." So his nickname became the Archivist. Whenever you needed to know anything, like, Jason, how many steps are there leading up to the burial ground? He always knew the answer to everything.
Jason is a fantastic actor. We wanted an actor who could really convey the conviction of a dad, the lovingness of a dad, and the clinicalness of a doctor. And he can turn those two things on. And so we were really confident that in the journey Lewis takes, where part or much of his belief system has to change, you had an actor with enough complexity to do that.
The relationship that Stephen King has in the book between Lewis and his wife is really cool. There's a baseness to them and a real, you know, they're not some kind of fictional character. Even their sexuality, their love life, the way he describes it, was really quite shocking to me when I read it. It made the story more intimate. You were able to just get in there and I think just have a couple of moments early on so you don't have to feel like you're told that you should like this couple. This couple's a nice couple. You get to see that They're good, they're bad, they got their ups, they got their problems, but they're a strong couple.
There were some early conversations where it was like, whoever you cast as Lewis, he's got to be able to be shirtless on the cover of Men's Fitness. We're like, what? Okay, if you say so, that's not that's not important to us.
But Jason Clarke can be
he can
shirtless
be.
on the
They
cover
actually got the
Men's
best of both worlds.
Rachel. For me, the scariest part of casting this movie was Rachel, because you had this one scene that sold the whole thing, which was a mom comes home to her husband and finds him with their dead daughter alive and talking and walking. And how do you react? If you can't sell that moment, if you come up short, then the whole movie falls apart. Amy, I knew her really as a writer and a director, and she is phenomenal. She conveys great sense of warmth, and you really like her as a person, and at the same time she's able to do all the dark, tragic, grieving, exhausting stuff.
With Amy, we really pushed for her. That role is like a roller coaster ride emotionally. I mean, she has to have all these heavy scenes dealing with her sister and stuff. And Amy just knocked it out of the park. I mean, she's been like an indie darling for so long. She pops up in all these like great iconic independent horror movies like You're Next and The Sacrament, these great movies. And we got to like put her in this. It's just a lot of fun because we're huge fans of those movies.
Yeah, it was a huge asset that she was also a writer and director. It really helped shape her character.
There is a light that's hers right here. Do you want me to just stay in the corner so I'm not blocking anything? Or do you want me to pass through that light?
Well, Amy, I feel that she's so overqualified for us. She's a fantastic writer and director herself. And yet, as a director, she knows it's very important to simply inhabit your role as an actor.
Could you raise the bed so that she doesn't have to go down?
We could do that.
You know what I mean? Because you want the bed in the shot, right?
Well, that'll be for the special.
I mean, when I'm acting, I have to take off my director's hat sometimes. Yeah,
yeah.
You can't have too many cooks in the kitchen.
The Wendigo, it was a myth passed down from the local tribes up this way. But to them, it wasn't just some campfire story. They believed it. They feared it.
I know everyone was very concerned about who's going to play Judd. Nobody could play Judd but Fred Gwynne, and we love Fred Gwynne's performance. But when we announced that John Lithgow was cast, I think everyone was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Like that was right there in front of us the whole time, but they never pictured him in the role, and now it just feels like a no-brainer.
Fred Gwynne, who played my part, or I'm playing his part, he was a good friend. We acted together on stage.
John has such a respect for Fred Gwynne, he was friends with the guy, that he didn't even want to see the original film. And he just didn't want to emulate what Fred had done already.
I knew John's career, from his theater days back in New York in the late 60s, early 70s, to his TV work, to his film work, to his, his stage work. And I love being around actors that have been around and done that and accomplished that and still loving their work at 72.
I was very much taken with the character of Judd. In a way, he was like a magician who could perform a trick which he knew he should never perform. And yet somehow he just can't resist performing it.
John Lithgow, he's got the perfect balance for Judd. I mean, this is a guy that's played the villain in Brian De Palma movies, and he's also played like
Cuddly Grandpa, or
and played the sweet man, and that's the duality that you need for Judd. Sweet, welcoming man that could have this bond with this young girl, but he's got dark secrets. He's got a troubled past. He's got things he's not sharing.
What happened to her?
Got sick. Passed away.
Well, maybe she's still out there, watching from heaven.
Jeté, in the role of Ellie, is the linchpin of the movie. Other than Church the Cat, all of the horror comes from Ellie.
It's always hard to pin your hopes on a child actor. There are plenty of movies, and I've worked on a couple of them, where it was a good try, but not good enough. And the movie will fall apart without that character really being strong and also being believably evil, which is tough for a girl of that age.
We auditioned a lot of girls for that part. We would bring in somebody, and they'd be great at the little kid stuff, being lovable, but they wouldn't be good at the horror stuff.
Jeté, she did a fantastic job of both playing the sweet daughter and also playing the malevolent force that she becomes.
It's easy to find a cute and precocious kid. It's not easy to find a kid that could go from that to the dark, bad seed.
And action.
Stop struggling, you useless cow.
So we were always very worried about the second half of the movie, and can this young actress flip like that and be convincingly dark and ominous and evil?
She was the person I saw, and I was like, that's her, when I saw her audition. If we hadn't found her, I don't know that you'd have a movie.
Jeté's incredibly sweet and is way more professional than Jason, John, and I are.
It was really cool to be a part of a movie that really made you think about like consequences and like if you were to bring someone back, like would you?
I'm sorry I couldn't help you. But I can fix this.
Stephen King, he gives you characters that it seems so real. Like they seem like they live next door to you. And so it's so easy to take the ride with them. And then he sets them on a path where they start to make choices. And you're screaming, please don't do that thing, whatever it is. But you know they will. And they keep making choices. And the situations get more horrifying and more electric. So what we tried to do was honor that tradition of making identifiable characters that felt like you knew them, that felt like they could be part of your life, and then making the ride that they go on as horrifying as possible.
C-Mark.
I love to think of it in the line of movies like The Shining, Rosemary's Baby, movies and stories that start simple, start quite calmly, as if nothing out of the ordinary is going to happen. And then slowly things seep in. You begin to see the little like green shoots of anxiety among these characters.
I think the primary design challenge is ultimately trying to depict Maine, rural Maine, not in rural Maine. But luckily, rural Montreal in the province of Quebec here in Canada has very, very similar overlaps in almost all ways.
I'm lucky in that I grew up in New England. So I know what New England looks like on sort of just a deep DNA level. And when we were debating on locations, I was the one who pushed Montreal because I knew how easy it would be to double Maine. Environmentally, it's very similar. It's the same kind of trees.
I didn't even know there was a difference between East Coast and West Coast trees,
I still don't know the difference. I trusted the people that...
Yeah, it's like, if you say so, and it's like, if fans are going to notice, then we want to make sure we do it right.
Then the house was a real battle. They looked forever, right? We tried to find houses closer to town because, ultimately you don't really get into the woods until you're an hour outside of any city. So ultimately we ended up an hour outside of town.
And that actually became probably the most difficult thing that we had to do in pre-production, was finding that main scary road there, a house close enough to the road, and then a forest behind the house.
You had to pick a farmhouse, an idyllic place you would move from Boston to Maine. What does that look like? To everybody, it looks slightly different, sometimes very different. There were probably, at the end of the day, a lot of arguments surrounding two different houses that had very different feels to them.
One was a blue house right on the road, and then there was our big red barn-like house that was set back from the road a little bit, but for me, it looked more like Maine, and the red house really stood out in the middle of the woods.
Finding the Creed's ranch solved a lot of problems. Not only did it have a great house that we're sitting in right now, but we did not have to do much to it architecturally. It was really actually embracing it for the most part as is.
And the back of the house was thousands of acres of forest, which ended up being useful to us because we got to shoot everything either in the house or just go into the backyard and shoot in the woods.
So we were able to find an amazing location for the pet cemetery, amazing location for the Deadfall. We were very, very fortunate to have almost a one-stop shop.
You know, you had the road, you had the house, we really shot inside the house, and really if you actually walked in the backyard of that house into the woods, there really was the cemetery. It was all in one place.
It was so great to shoot there, and it really provided us a great look. And it actually had its own pet cemetery. Not that we used the real one, but it was kind of exciting for everyone to know that there was a real live pet cemetery behind this house.
Then 400 meters down the road, we had Judd's exterior and interior house. The perfect shell of a house that was just getting ready to be renovated. They hadn't done any significant work. They'd done some work to the floors, done some replastering, but the old, you know, the damaged ceilings were still up. So we were able to embrace that in a very, very large way. So this has, for almost 4 of the 8 weeks of shooting, become our backlot. So almost 50% of the movie we've been able to do in this one physical location.
Mud, dirt, Rachel's blood. As a costume designer, it's super difficult. I find it to keep things simple because we always want, you know, to put more, brighter, bigger, shinier, more volume pleats. We want to, you know, we want to do a fashion show every time. In this case, it was like, this show is not about costume, where there are no fancy costumes because we didn't want anything to be distracting. So the only thing that was distracting was pretty much the masks, and we prepped the mask for a good 4 weeks, if not more. Tried to pinpoint the perfect cat faces to put on that little girl was a lot of work. So we did so many different masks. I think we did 9 different masks, different shapes of cats, different colors, and different workmanship. So I had to show them all the different possibilities. That's what's pretty much with every pieces, even t-shirts. Show them all the different possibilities for them to judge, okay, this is the one.
And death for her is scary.
Please, Rachel, doesn't mean we should shield her from.
I always tell my actors, you know, we don't have to show everything. I mean, this is like between you and me. If you wish to have a little piece of a rope in your pocket, if you wish to have a stone or something that may not go on camera, I can provide it. If it's going to help you become the character, that's the magic. That's the magic wand. It's like just give them the tools and poof, they transform.
These are all people's pets?
Well, Old Town's been using this place for generations. The graves get older, the closer you get to the center. See this one over here? I carved this myself. That's my dog, Biffer.
I looked back and talked to a lot of the friends that I grew up with in rural Alberta and asked for their memories of the local pet cemeteries. And the stories I was hearing and talking about the details of how they would dress those things became intrinsic to my realization that it can't be designed. It actually has to have naive rural artistic ability and that innocence of children dealing with death, making something beautiful but also sad at the same time. Ann Smart, our set decorator, knew a great artist and specialized set dresser by the name of Jennifer Small. So a lot of credit goes to, you know, Anne and Jennifer for coming up with a way to economically make a lot of these installations and create what I think is a really, really stunning set, layering this to the level of which that has, you know, it's given it 100-year believability in 4 weeks.
You know, each grave has its own character, somebody's pet, and they went into like great detail of like having like a little picture of like a little dog or some sort of collar from an animal. And so each grave itself is an individual work of art.
People felt emotional. Crew members felt emotional going in there because it felt like a real thing, and it felt like, oh, we should be, you know, respectful of this place.
It's amazing, I think, how much emotional recollection it triggers for people to when they had pets as kids.
We actually moved the ending from the basement of the Creed house to the pet cemetery because we loved it so much, because it looked so good. We said, you know what? We got to move this whole thing over there and go back to the pet cemetery at the end of the movie. So that's how good it was.
The level of detail on all the grave markers, you know, what they did with the Deadfall and how long it took to build that thing, that was all practical. No CGI enhancement in any of that stuff.
21 Charlie, take 1B marker.
The Deadfall behind it was the really giant thing, you know, assembling thousands of logs and branches and piling them up 17 or 18 feet and making it look like something that was designed to protect humans from that burial ground.
It wasn't just a pile of wood. It had to be hollow in such way so that we could potentially do some puppeteering from the inside. On top of that, there was just the structural demands of making sure that that was safe. We were going to have camera operators, actors, we'll have people on that.
You can give those a tug. Feel how strong they are? They're not going anywhere.
Then a lot of sweat by the greens department, bringing in branches that had the shape or form of human body elements and or felt, you know, just dangerous in that way. So a lot of dried pine and a lot of driftwood as well to get this almost bone-like quality out of the Deadfall. It's not carved foam or the traditional elements. That is just real wood.
Just that little bit of landing. Jeté then approaches. Right. Then he does the shovel-less swing just with his arm.
Working with Laurie Rose, he was part of the pre-production at a much earlier standpoint than in many cases on these kinds of movies. Usually you don't have as much time with the DP being so involved in the pre-production. So this was a real benefit for the two of us. We were always trying to think of benefits and disadvantages for him just as much as what any location would afford me. So to be able to have those discussions constantly in pre-production allowed us to be very efficient with our choices.
Coming from right and crossing over.
We're getting notes back from the studio where they basically from day one are like, this is a beautiful movie. Wow, this movie's really being well made. And the reason they're saying that is because of the images that Laurie's designing.
So in terms of visual approach, the directors were quite keen on trying to subvert what you normally might expect. Often you might start in a quite a sedate, steady way, so it feels like there's some sort of classic formality to it. So it's all very flowing and gentle and nicely, beautifully composed. And what you would ordinarily do is then you kind of descend as the locks come off and it goes kind of crazy. That you'll get more and more frantic and more. We tried to subvert that, so we tried to do a little bit more of the looser dynamic at the beginning and then trying to get slightly more eerie and composed as we move on.
We were big fans of Laurie before this. We'd seen all the films that he shot with Ben Wheatley and loved them. They all looked beautiful. And they also showed that he had this range. If you look at like Ben Wheatley's filmography, he's got everything from the shaky handheld camcorder stuff to really composed, beautiful shots. And we knew that this film, we wanted to sit somewhere in between that to where like it has sort of had a naturalistic feel and could feel very realistic and grounded, but at the same time it was going to go into these places where there was going to be some more fantastical elements that we wanted to bring a little bit of style into, and he had that mix of both.
Dennis and Kevin are so incredibly steeped in horror film reference that they can speak in quotes and they can talk in sequences from classic films, which is a challenge, that they can say, oh, of course you've seen that shot from that, and yeah, well, you know, and I go home and I quickly Google it and try and keep up. So what's great about that is that from a very early stage, there was lots of visual references. But you rarely, some people do, but you rarely just lift a reference and do exactly the same thing. What you'll take is that composition or that the mood of something and you'll transplant it onto your story. That's a way of kind of using a trick or a device that's been used before and making it your own and then threading it into your story. So it's always a collection of all of those things. That's really exciting. Using references, you can go, well, we'll take that bit from there and that bit from there and that bit from there. And when you put it in a melting pot, you make your own film. One of the references that I used that we kind of threw around between us was The Exorcist. It's not about a zombie apocalypse. It's about the experience of a very small family unit. And so I think we've tried to draw a little bit of that small unit, family unit dealing with this bizarre thing.
We think Church ran away, sweetheart. He didn't run away. Look. He's right there.
Oh, no. Church.
One of those damn Orinco trucks.
Dad!
Shit.
Dad!
We can't let Ellie see this.
Nobody knows what that place is, what happens in that stony ground. But the soil of a man's heart is stonier, Lewis. What we did last night, we did for Ellie. Well, that's your cat now.
Daddy,
Yeah.
close the door all the way. I don't want church coming in anymore.
As a kid, you don't have that sense of the finality of death. I didn't know what a zombie was. I didn't know about, resurrection. When you're a kid, you don't know about Lazarus, rising from the dead. And you don't know that this is a theme that runs through a lot of historic literature. And so I don't think that part of it resonated probably for me as a kid. What you really think about is your cat. I had a cat who got hit by a car, and, I found him on the side of my house dead and stiff and all of that. So from that experience, it's sort of resonated. And I think as a kid, you probably think it's a book about a cat.
God! The most challenging thing on a movie set, when you read a cat in a script, people go, oh my gosh, why would you do that? Well, you know what? It just takes time. Dennis and Kevin, the directors of this project, they're under demands. They got to get it done, and they're relying on us to get it done. What I'm relying on them is to give this the environment to do it in. And keeping a quiet, non-ruffled set is essential.
The cats are on set, and everyone would get quiet, and all of a sudden they'd come in with the cat. And you would always have to let the cat out of the cat carrier, and the cat would have to approve the set. Remember that? So the cat would always walk around and sniff the whole set, and everyone just had to shut up and just kind of, like a diva, let the cat do his own thing. And then once the cat was like, all right, I'm okay with this room, then and only then could you proceed. To see how well the cats were treated, they had something called, was it Cat Village?
Yeah.
And it was this giant circus that they had set up for the cats where they had their own trailer. I mean, they were treated better than the main cast was.
It is a challenge working with cats, but it actually was way easier than I thought it was going to be, because going in, I didn't think you could train a cat.
On your bed. Down. Good boy.
I can't get my cats to do anything. They scratch, the furniture, and I can't get them to stop. But
we can't train them, so I don't know how they do it.
So I just always believed you couldn't train cats.
It is relationship-based training, so we form a solid relationship of trust so that we can take them into environments that can be somewhat intimidating at first, like sets. And when they trust us, that it helps them overcome their fears. And cognition is decreased with stress. So when you use food, relationship, positive reinforcement, as in play, toys, then the cats enjoy the work. The other element of positive reinforcement training is training for the makeup. Lindsay spent 2 months teaching the cats to feel comfortable with grooming and bathing. And we do that with positive association. So day 1, trickle a little bit of water while they're eating. Every day they get a little more water, a little more makeup, until it's not a big deal for the cats. And that way they can go through makeup and they can go through baths, and this is not something that we're surprising them with.
And you really can't tell, I find, the difference between the 5 cats once you're in makeup.
All the cats have a different personality, so what we do is we run with their personalities. Tonic is the smart cat, being the busy, active, cute, super intelligent guy. He's the pre-grave church. And then we have the post-grave church based on their personalities and their looks. Quiet, calm, kitties that like to stare, that like to sit, and those are our out-of-the-grave cats.
That's a good boy. Yes, that's a good boy.
You got 5 cats, 5 different personalities, and you take all those pieces and you put together one awesome character.
Yeah.
Ellie really loved that cat, didn't she? More than anything. And you love Ellie.
Of course I do.
So follow me.
Both the Pet Cemetery and the Deadfall, that's all here on location. So that part of the path and journey is very real. That's all real material. Then we transition into the soundstage.
In the book and in that iconic chapter where they go to bury church in the burial ground, you definitely feel a difference between when you're on one side of the Deadfall and when you're on the other side of the Deadfall. The woods is starting to get darker and creepier and more ancient. We wanted to have a look for that. We wanted to have a division to where the audience could actually aesthetically feel that. They could actually like see that change happening. So it just made sense to say, you know what? Everything on the previous side of the Deadfall we'll really shoot in actual woods, on location behind the house we were shooting at. But once they go over the Deadfall, we'll shoot that on a stage.
In the stage, we've got a variety of petrified forests, swamps, very large kind of mountainous faces, the stone steps that lead up to the burial ground and the burial ground itself.
Almost to the bog.
But we were like, you got to get the swamp in the movie. You know, the swamp wasn't in the first film. We have to have it. We have to get it in this film. And we understand why it wasn't in the first film. It's hard. We had to build a water set in the stage. And then we had to make it look as big as we possibly could. But we always liked the idea that the swamp is almost kind of like a moat that was sort of like protecting this hidden mountain. Like, you not only had to know where it was, you had to like tread through about a half-a-mile swamp to even get to it. So those are the things you have to fight for. You know, they're visually stunning and interesting, but, you know, sometimes they want you to make it as simple as possible. You know, a very linear way to get there. And we always loved the idea of this long journey.
What was that?
You know, like you're entering into Bavaria, you know, and you're going to see Dracula. It's got to really feel like a journey into this heart of darkness.
It was a big deal to decide to build this all on stage, to build the woods, the bog. We could have, I guess, gone out and found these locations, but this is a magical place in the book and in our story, and to be able to control the lighting and the rigging of all this stuff ended up being really important to us. And so we embarked on this 6-week build of this on this stage for basically 3 days of photography.
The pet cemetery through to the ancient burial ground, that, you know, integration of using a location and a built set to try to depict that journey and make it believable, but also feel a little bit amplified, is always a tricky balance. But the crew I had saw what we were trying to depict and were able to interpret it very accurately.
You know, you come in there and you see what they can do, and it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I've been around a lot of film sets, a lot of big films, and this is a wonderful set. And when the lights come in, the smoke come in, and the wood and the smell, and you can see a lot of the detail, the little mushrooms they've got growing on the side, or the scratchings from beasts that have been in there. You know, it's the detail's fantastic.
One of the changes that we thought very long and hard about when we discussed what we would keep from the original book and what we would change was the idea of not having Gage be the child who dies and comes back from the graveyard.
One of the earliest things I said was, I think that the child who gets killed should be Ellie. And I said, let's play it right up to the moment where people who have read the book, you know, think, oh, your Gage is going to get it, and then flip it, and then no, it's Ellie.
Thinking about it as we developed the script, what really helped us make such a strong story is the relationship that Lewis has with his daughter Ellie. That father-daughter relationship felt like a place where the audience could really invest in the family before we start to pull things apart.
Because she's older, because Lewis and Rachel have such more of a deeper connection to her. She's at that point, you know, of being, you know, a young girl who's just really starting to become a friend. So you become that much more invested in it. So I thought it was a great choice, I really did. You know, and also the fact that on a practical standpoint, you can get much more out of a performance, you know, with an 8 or 9-year-old girl than you can with a 2-year-old child.
Ellie was the character that was leading a lot of the themes in this movie. There's a lot of early on scenes in the movie where she's talking about death with her parents or wondering about when her pet's gonna die. And it just seemed that in the end, she should be the one carrying us through that arc to its completion.
We have a big 18-wheeler accident with the Orenco truck. It's a combination, it's a great effort of different departments, from stunts, having a really good stunt driver for an 18-wheeler. We have this gentleman called Rod Bell from Toronto. He's a very experienced driver, especially for big loads. And then we have our effects crew from Montreal, Louis Craig, and also visual effects from Mr. X. So it's a great combination of those department, along with a second-year director, Paul Jennings, and then all these creative minds getting together to make it happen, make it safe. The tanker flipping, it's a separate deal on its own that has to be photographed, you know, on an empty road, obviously making it safe again. Mostly done through special effects, where cables are involved, you know, trucks towing in order to make it flip the way the directors wants it to flip, and then land and slide to an end position.
I love tragic elements in horror movies. I love horror movies that deal with domestic issues, you know, like even The Exorcist, just about a family and a daughter and a mother spiraling out of control while she's trying to save her daughter. The Shining is about a family falling apart, alcoholism, abuse, you know, claustrophobia. So I think horror movies that deal with people are always very interesting.
It's relatability, really. I mean, because horror movie is based on fear, so it's really, you know, tapping into fears that we all have, you know, things that are within us and things that we deal with in our lives, like how Pet Sematary is a horror movie about grief, you know, really just making horror about things that we all experience, the fears that we all have, things that we could relate to in our lives.
I know what you're thinking you're doing, Louis, but she won't come back the same.
I think for any viewer, facing mortality as a human being is something we all go through as we grow up. And the flip side of the fear of our own dying is a loved one that dies, and how far are you willing to go? And are you willing to believe in something that goes completely against your belief system or faith? So for even someone like Louis, who's an atheist, he believes in the periodic table of the elements and the laws of thermodynamics, the Hippocratic Oath, but he clearly buys into this. So somebody who has a science-based belief system is even willing to continue down this path.
You cannot imagine the things people can convince themselves of. And that's exactly Louis. He's making a decision that on one level doesn't make sense, on another level makes total sense. And that's sort of the nature of tragedy, you know? It's something so deeply rooted in us.
I think this film goes beyond, or the story goes beyond horror. I mean, it goes into a deeper level of what true horror is. I mean, this man, it's Frankenstein. If you create the monster, or if you bring the monster to life, what happens then if the monster has consciousness and has, you know, it's like AI or something, isn't it? But it's very human to hope. It's just one of those human things, isn't it? You hope that it'll be okay. It's very human, it's very natural, and that's why I think it's very easy to go with Louis until you see what the full weight of his responsibility is.
Daddy. Where am I?
Oh, my little girl. Oh, you're home.
Oh.
Visual 110 Apple, take one.
Mark. Jeté, give us more of a blank expression.
Set. Okay, guys, quiet all around, please. And action.
Here we go.
In the book and in the movie, Louis's character sees death at the beginning of this movie very black and white. It's natural. There's nothing to be afraid of.
What is it?
It's just a tangle.
Rachel, having experienced terrible things as a child with her sister, is the exact opposite, which is, I want to stay away from death. And the irony is, by the end of the movie, they've switched sides. Louis is full into the death question and trying to deny it, and she's saying, don't deny it. So that's a really interesting pivot for those two characters to take.
There was a truck, and everything went black.
It's okay now. You're home.
thematically, what I find so interesting about the book and both movies is you can't run from death. It's gonna find you.
I can hear the woods.
Windows are closed, sweetheart.
Not like that. Inside.
You have this person walking around after having come back from the dead, and you have to find, again, that tricky balance of treating it as realistically as you can, but at the same time, though, aesthetically, having something that feels off and unnatural and scary, but isn't overly gross. We hired someone named Adrian Moreau, who we're huge fans of. This guy's done some of the best makeup for some of our favorite horror films. And he got it, you know, we really tried to get into the color of the skin and what the skin would look like, how the veins would look, how they would move. You know, a lot of thought went into that, into making it, again, like unnerving, but not so visually distracting that you would check out as an audience, finding that sweet spot.
Adrian had originally come up with something a bit more pushed, I believe, for undead Ellie, but at the same time, they wanted to keep the innocence of the character of Ellie. So they didn't want the makeup to be the focus of her character. It's really about her performance. So we just did some simple veins. Adrian had designed the veins to sort of come up the side of the head on both sides and to give her sort of a gaunt look. And we would shadow the eyes a little bit just to bring the darkness out. And the makeup was relatively simple.
The artistry that goes into it, it's incredibly detailed. Just so accurate in terms of the way the veins look underneath the skin, or, you know, it takes so much time. It's like sculpting.
And then that sort of evolved as we added an eyepiece to her, which brought her eye down just a little bit.
Just something to make it a little off-putting, a little unsettling.
Yeah, the idea that you're seeing only the outside, but that eye is telling you that whatever's going on in the head and the back of the head is way more horrendous. You're just seeing, like, the mask. You're not really seeing all the damage that's been done behind the mask.
Love you, Daddy.
Cut, Jeté's on lunch, thank you.
We knew one of the challenges with working with young children is that they're limited to an 8-hour day. The second challenge with working with children is that if they don't have prosthetic experience, then you don't know how they will react and how well they will sit through a prosthetic makeup. But Jeté is amazing. She has been absolutely perfect. She can sit through any makeup, and she's made her lives so much easier.
So you can just go puff and hit this. These things can go flying, so the next move you can do is this. And the last thing you do was exactly what you were doing. Grab this one, and you turn around. Puff.
For all department heads, you work as a team, as a family. You work very closely with everybody. Hair, makeup, costumes. You really are a family when you work together because it's the efforts of everybody that creates that one look. So Ellie, for instance, it's not just the makeup that makes Ellie look undead, it's the hair, it's the costume.
Pirouette.
We had to come up with a burial dress. If we had put her a simple structured dress, it may not have been so dramatic or so ghost-like. So that's why we went with cream, lacy, soft, flowy fabric. She's got an underdress under her lace dress that is like very, very light silk, which we crushed. So if wind picks in her dress, you'll see her. So it gives her a bit of a ghost feeling. And then all the magic, I think, about this dress is the way we broke it down. It works very well. Like, she's been buried, so she's covered with dirt. She had to cross the forest and walk through murky, swampy water. So that's why if you look at her dress, it's like greenish and brownish. And that's how she shows up to her father with this very, very dirty dress. So I'm quite happy that it was this swamp, otherwise the dress would have been clean and it would not have been so dramatic.
Get the blood going
It's
now.
in there.
Okay, action.
Hello, Chet.
Stop it, Ellie. No, just slow down.
It was really cool to see how Ellie dramatically changes from a sweet, caring little girl who loves her cat to like an angry, like almost evil kind of spirited little girl.
Jeté, she's our lucky charm. I mean, she's just magic. She's so easy with everybody, so relaxed about the process, she's so real. And, I mean, the character travels an extraordinary journey. It's something that any grown-up actor would be intimidated by. She's not intimidated by anything.
There's a place in the woods, Rach. Beyond the pet cemetery. It's an ancient place, a burial ground. It brings things back.
What I hope the audiences connect with is this family that is going through an extremely traumatic event and the different ways that they react to it, and you know, in times of grief, how different reactions and denial of death can sort of tear things apart. You know, this is a metaphor that goes pretty far with that, you know, but at the same time, I think that there's something incredibly human to the story.
She doesn't want me here.
No. Mommy just needs time.
It's okay. I don't want her here either.
The way that they treat Zelda in this is a much deeper sort of exploration from Rachel's psyche and how that affected her and her own sort of denial of death as she goes through it again with her own daughter.
With Zelda, I mean, she has quite a well-developed backstory, considering that she's basically used as a harbinger of grief from Rachel's past. She interacts in a way that is really surprising and horrifying, and the execution of her makeup and the performance really support that in a way that I think people are going to find refreshing.
Never get out of bed again. All right, and if you go, that part would be yelling. Never get out of bed again. Okay, they're coming at her. That's a famous line from the book.
There was a time when we pondered a version of the film that did not have Victor Pascal or Zelda, and it just doesn't work.
Well, it's a big book, so you have to make choices, which is always tricky because you want to do everything. There's also a movie out there that's been done that people really dig. So you don't want to do what the movie did, but you also don't want to avoid what the movie did because some of that subject matter has to be in this movie.
But in the development of a script, there tends to be this desire to sort of whittle things down to one answer or try to clarify things to one thing. And so there were conversations that happened at some point, which was, do we need all this extra stuff? And the answer was, yeah, because it's Zelda.
Some fans, some people felt like the first movie didn't do enough Zelda. You know, we tried to do more. I don't think necessarily as a reaction to that, but it was a part of the story we were interested in, and it explained Rachel's character a lot about what is her fear and what's going on for her. So in that way, I think it was super helpful to spend some more time with it.
The idea of sickness in general is just frightening. I mean, like, if you strip away all the loudness and the sensationalism of the Zelda character, you're left with a very sad story about a girl dying in her room, and parents overwhelmed, the family not knowing what to do. So I think we were really interested in kind of the grounded, realistic nature of what that would be like. A lot of times that can be more frightening.
Zelda, honestly, on the day that we started shooting her, we started pulling off pieces of the prosthetics because she stopped looking like a girl. And it was really critically important that she was a 12-year-old girl, that it was, Rachel's sister.
We ended up modifying Zelda sort of on the spot. And I know in the end, we ended up taking it from sort of a more extreme nightmare version, and we brought it down a little bit.
We wanted you to be able to empathize and see the little kid underneath this monster.
Because her morphology is so distorted and so important visually, we had to find a way to reveal her back, her shoulders, her legs. So I'm making this little slip with buttons in the back, very tiny straps here with little puffy shoulders. So it gives her a little girl's look, but still reveal all the prosthetic that will be applied on her.
We ended up doing a back piece for her to change her back, her spine. We did her legs and we did her hands.
She's pretty incredible. It's kind of amazing to watch her just completely turn on zombie Ellie.
Here we go.
You were watching, you're like, I'm actually scared by this 9-year-old girl. Like, there's something crazy going on inside her. And then at the same time, she'll get out of a scene like that, and then you'll see her running outside saying, you know, where is craft service? I want to get some fruit. She is a spectacular actor.
It's been really fun for me as a writer to be involved all the way through filming. I've been working with producers and Dennis and Kevin intimately all the way through filming. As material is being covered, we look at it, we talk about it, we discuss it, we look for places where we can deepen what's landing, what's not working.
Originally, we had the climax where there's the attack on Rachel, and then her and Lewis sort of had their climax, and it was just sort of down in the basement, and it just kind of felt like anticlimactic for a climax. It just felt like another fight in the house. So we were looking to make this scene more dynamic, and the idea came about to bring it back to the title of the movie, to that place where this all started, the pet cemetery. So there we were making changes to the script on set.
As a screenwriter, that's a very romantic notion to be writing on the set. It's been really fun. I think, does that even happen anymore, where someone's writing and then they hand the paper off and they're like, you know, run this to the set, get this to the cameras.
You started this, Daddy. When you buried Church. When you buried me!
And unfortunately, there's no paper coming out of a typewriter, and we're emailing, but there's been some very exciting and some very gratifying changes that have been taking place on the fly as we're going, with feedback from actors, with feedback from the directors, and it's been really exciting and fun.
I thought we could be a family. I wanted to be a family, but we can't.
But we can, Daddy. We can.
I have this very mixed feeling about the horror genre in general. I'm terrified by watching scary movies, and yet I'm attracted to them.
I'm not sure exactly why we do horror or why we watch horror, but it's a kind of emotional exercise. I don't know why we long for that, but writers love to write it, and we love to experience it. We love to experience something that gives us so much pain. And I don't know, I can't explain that, but I sure like it.
Once you feel the power of that place, you make up the sweetest smelling reasons to go back. But I was wrong. Sometimes dead is better.
This is what's so extraordinary about the story that Stephen King devised. There are people in your life that you love so much you feel you cannot do without them. So what would you do if you had the chance to bring them back when you lose them? You know, it's the Faustian question.
Well, if I had the chance to bury anyone in the pet cemetery and bring them back from the dead, I would probably go first to my dog Tallulah, because it feels like you should start with an animal. But having spent many years in this story, I think I may have learned the lesson.
No, my advice was walk away. Keep on walking.
Probably not, because I now know this, like, all these consequences.
Well, I actually thought about this a lot in the making of this movie, and if somebody said that I could have another moment with my child, I have 2 boys, to say goodbye, to say, I love you, you'll never know how proud I was of you, you know, all those things, I think I would do that. You know, I don't know that I'd have the stomach or strength to then end it, you know, properly.
I think what's so interesting about it is you can't possibly know until you're there. You know, the rational part of you says absolutely not. But in those moments of tremendous grief, that's not a moment where rationale is necessarily winning out. So I think it would be super hard to resist it. I'm not sure what I would do.
I mean, I've lost people who are extremely close to me, and I've thought if they could come back in the version that they were when they were once alive, then pretty much all of them. Anyone that was close to me, I'd go and bury in a heartbeat. But, you know, if I learned a lesson from Stephen King, it's sometimes dead is better.